Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Brian. I lead developer relations here at LocalStack. For those of you who are new to this meetup, first of all, thank you for joining. If you haven't been here before, we talk about things like building for AWS, building for Snowflake, CI/CD, DevOps, and of course, LocalStack. So this month we've got two great speakers. We're going to be talking about Dagger, which is a way of orchestrating your workflows. So I'm really excited to learn more about Dagger and also about our new LocalStack Dagger module. So this is what you can look forward to today. We're now doing the intro and welcome, but we've got two sessions coming up. First, we've got Jason McAllister, who's going to be talking about supercharging CI with Dagger. So if you don't know about Dagger, you'll learn a little bit more about it there. We'll do some open Q&A. So if you have questions, you can just throw them in chat, whether you're on YouTube or LinkedIn, just throw them in the chat there, and we'll ask him the questions when he's done with this session. As well, we're gonna have our own Harsh Mishra is going to be giving a talk about our new LocalStack Dagger module. So if you once you kind of learn what Dagger is, you'll then see how you can actually integrate LocalStack and use that to build workflows that deploy resources to LocalStack. And then we'll finish with some Q&A with Harsh as well. So that's our schedule for today. I want to take a moment now to introduce our speakers. So first up, we've got Jason. Jason, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm Jason. I'm a solutions engineer at Dagger. I've been in the software industry for 20 years, which is more than I like to say sometimes. But I've done everything from networking to software, and now focusing on CI related stuff, and of course now AI agents as part of our new LLM initiative. But super excited to be here, and thanks for having me.
Heard about AI. Is it going to be a thing? Do you think it's going to be big?
I think it's over. I'm just
Oh,
just kidding. I'm kidding.
actually. All right. Well, for those of you who've joined us before, probably already recognize Harsh, but I'm going to give him a moment to introduce himself anyway. So, because never know, people might be new. Harsh, tell us a little bit more about you.
Hi, folks. I'm Hirsch. Nice to meet all of you, especially the ones who have joined pretty fresh. If you don't already know me, I have been hosting these meetups for about 3 years now. So first, kind of managing and hosting, and now mostly managing them on behind the scenes. And I'm just so glad to be talking about Dagger and how LocalStack can play out together, and how you can pretty much test out your AWS apps, because that's what gets people excited the most. So happy to talk about it, and would love to interact with all our audience over here.
Great. Thank you both. All right. So, we're going to go ahead and actually just jump right into the first talk, which is going to be Jason. So, Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. So today I'd like to talk to you about how you can supercharge your CI with Dagger. And really, before we do that, we want to talk about what Dagger really is before we actually get into a demo. So Dagger is an open source tool that's about building workflows, and workflows meaning like pipelines for shipping software. So and it's really focused on building containerized and reusable pieces that you can kind of ship everywhere. And most people think of CI and they think of CI means GitHub Actions or Azure Pipelines or Jenkins, but CI can really be anywhere, especially when you have tools like Dagger. Like if you have GitHub Actions, you can't really run that locally. That's kind of the first big thing there. So again, Dagger kind of lets you move the concept of CI and choose where you define CI as to run. And it's great for delivering software, but also we have support for LLM. And so AI agents can also be built with Dagger, and it is by the creators of Docker. So when we talk about these kind of workflows, we really want to talk about components. And when I say components, we're really talking about the types that you can use. And when you're building that pipeline, often you start with like a shell script, a make file, just file, task file, all the different variations. And those are all kind of doing something similar. They're running some commands, doing some things. But one of the downsides there is that's running usually on your machine, your environment. And with Dagger, you get these components for containers and files and Git repositories and directories. And those become type safe and native things you can kind of reuse everywhere. And you get to use, your programming language of choice, which is great. But also a part of that is that you can chain those functions. So as you can see, this example is a run function that takes a Dagger directory and takes a Dagger service. And a service is kind of a way to spin something up that's a container, whether it be a database, a website, an API, and share that. You can expose that with your host machine, or you can share that with another container here, where you can see we're actually binding that into that container. So we kind of really build this chainable flow of passing all these things around and kind of have this really nice portable workflow that does all the things that we would typically do with a normal application or CI, and kind of let us move that around and push that to, say our laptop. So again, you can see here we have Go, Python, and TypeScript, but we also have Java, PHP, and some other experimental SDKs as well that you can also use. And one of those things too is that we have, I don't think this is going to actually show the animation, but we have a Dagger shell, which is kind of like, I don't want to say REPL, but it's a good way to look at it, where you can enter a session that's, let you chain commands and start containers and really script those out. And if you think of your typical shell commands, your shebang, your bash, run this, use environment and all that, you could kind of use Dagger in the same way, but you get those, give me a container from Alpine, give me a directory, or clone this Git repository into this container. So you kind of get the ability to take your CI and really make it like rapid, and you can prototype it on your machine, on your MacBook Pro that has all this RAM and all this CPU, and or you could run it on a Raspberry Pi, a stack of those, or in the cloud. It doesn't matter. It's really about getting this really, really nice flow where you choose how you use Dagger with an SDK, the shell, the calling Dagger modules. It's pretty incredible what you can do. Like I said, we talk about AI agents. You can't have a conversation without talking about AI agent related stuff. So Dagger has a native type called LLM and ENV. And before we get into that, it's because Dagger is made with containers, it's all sandboxed. So the runtime is very secure. It's put into a container when you run it. So only the things that you expose from your host machine are actually in there. We have supports for secrets. Those could be 1Password, HashiCorp, Vault file, all kinds of different types. And when you have that LLM kind of experience there and all those types, you can actually make a really beautiful AI agent where you can see everything that's kind of being done. So you can run that AI agent really constrained in this nice little sandbox. And with the open telemetry support that we have for tracing, you can see everything that actually kind of happens in the step and how long it took. And you kind of give them, you can define tools similar to MCP, but not really MCP, that you give your LLM to say, hey, you can run this function, you can call this thing, you have this module you have access to, and return a container when you're done. Like I mentioned before, we have tracing. So we have a product called Dagger Cloud that's really about seeing, it's not about the compute, it's about seeing the observability and the tracing. So as you run those commands and create a container and put a file in there, those take time, those cause errors. They could expect the file to be there, it's not there. And with Dagger Cloud and the Dagger terminal user interface, the TUI, you can kind of see all those steps. So you know exactly what's happening. And that moves from your workflow that you're running on your laptop as a test before you push up the CI to your GitHub Actions or your Jenkins using one of our integrations. So you get the ability to see exactly what's happening in your pipeline, which if you've ever opened up like GitHub Actions and try to view the logs on something that's big, like sometimes the browser just crashes because there's too many logs and you can't actually search it. So this is a great way to kind of move around from that. And we'll see a demo of that here in a minute. So it's really incredible once you have the observability into your workflow to say, oh, okay, well, I was making a container and this is using the wrong version of Go, wrong version of Node, etc. And again, the Dagger CLI is the primary tool that you use to kind of interact with Dagger. And what you'll see is that it runs anywhere. Anywhere it can run a container. You can run it in Kubernetes, you can run it on your Raspberry Pi, your MacBook, GitHub Actions, anywhere where the engine can run, which is a container. You can kind of push that in there and it captures those telemetry and the logs, and you kind of get to see everything on any of the programming language that you choose. And if you're writing a TypeScript project or a Go project and you want to use Dagger, but you are more comfortable with Python for your CI, then you can use that. You can mix and match those languages, and it's pretty incredible. We're going to see later that a Dagger module, and when you add Dagger to a project, that's kind of isolated into that specific project. And those are usually specific to your needs. The version of TypeScript or the version of Node or Go that you're using are kind of specific to that project, but you really want to have the ability to share that work. Once you've wrote the module that uploads the file to S3, you kind of want to share that, and you don't want to just rewrite that code over and over and over again. And that's where Dagger modules come into play. And Dagger modules are, again, written with an SDK of your choice. So you get the Go, Python, TypeScript, PHP, Java, and you build those modules with the functions that you need to, say, publish a file to S3. You use all the native types, you return a string to the URL or the actual file itself. It's really up to you using Dagger types. But what's important is that you can move that into its own repository and call it the S3 module. And S3 module is responsible for all the stuff that needs to happen with S3. And then you can go back to your project that needs to use S3 and Dagger install that module, no matter what language is written in, and you get to use that in your code editor, and you can kind of see the type completion and the types and the arguments. All that is just kind of out of the box, just works. One of the ways we do that is we have the Daggerverse. So daggerverse.dev, and you can see a lot of modules that people have already written and they've already published, and those are open source on GitHub. You can see here we have the K3S module. We have the Docusaurus, the Node, GitHub Actions. We have a lot of pre-built things that the community has written and published, and now you get to consume those as part of your workflow. If you need K3S, there's a K3S module. You just Dagger install, and you can see some examples of that. So it's really once you realize you can create modules and make them kind of generic, and you can publish those and reuse those across programming languages, it's really incredible to see what you can do. And of course, we are very, since we're an open source company, we really focus on our Discord. You can see a lot of the conversations happening in real time. So if you're curious, we'd love to have you join our Discord, ask questions, you'll get answers. And then we also the docs, which just recently launched. I think that was Monday. We redesigned the docs, and everything was good to go. And we pushed it out, and we really focused on the journey for the users. So that's really something that you should check out too. But with that said, that's enough talk. We've already learned kind of about Dagger and kind of what it is, but let's see some actual code. So let me switch my screen real quick. And we should be able to see this okay. And if you can't see it, someone I'm sure will tell me. So here I have a TypeScript project. It's got a simple view. This is made for Lambda, so it's kind of a little weird that your HTML is all in line, and has a couple handlers and some helpers, and really just has like an API endpoint and a view that you can kind of use. So there's, again, everything is kind of very, very generic. There's some tests in here that you can see that we're writing tests using Jest. And we have, what you'll first notice is we have a Dagger JSON, and you can kind of see that we're using this engine version. The SDK that we're using is TypeScript, and where that directory is. So again, we'll talk about the scripts here in a second. This is how we would traditionally deploy something. You would have this kind of crazy long deploy.sh. There's a bunch of stuff, and hopefully you have the right version of JQ, and you have this installed, and you have the right permissions, and you can complete your task with this, and this works. But once you become a little more complex, because there's only like really two things that are true about software. One, it'll break, and two, that it's going to get more complex over time. So as new team members come on, they need to deploy something, or you need to move to a different a different type of Lambda, switching to ARM version. All those things are complicated and change the complexity of the original software you built on day one. It just continues to grow. So this is kind of a way to really look at how you could do something simple. But again, once it kind of starts to break, and complexity, and then it breaks, and then there's that one person who touches the CI, and they are forever the CI person, and they are never allowed to leave. And then they leave the company, and then it's just kind of chaos, and nobody wants to touch it. So what you have now is, if I have Dagger installed, I've already kind of built this module, and you can see I have this Dagger directory here. And I have, in my source, is TypeScript. Again, it could have been any programming language that I wanted. But I have this class here. It's called Lambda API Example, matches the name in my Dagger JSON. It's got some defaults here. I want to call my function name and my role name, and what image I'm going to use, and has some commands. So we have a base function that returns a container type. Again, going back to those primitives, these are all things that you just kind of get type completion on. So you can kind of see that I have the OCI, compatible container, what functions are on there, what methods are on there I can call. And, so we're going to create a container. We're going to run some commands because I realized I needed zip in the base image that Node has and doesn't ship with it. Setting some work directory stuff. Again, this looks very, very familiar to like a Docker file, but it's very expressive. You get programming language tools and third-party packages that you can just pull in and use as part of this. And when we actually call the Dagger CLI and we call this command, this whole thing gets packaged and run in the Dagger engine and as a container, and it will kind of take care of the programming language and which versions of these you need. And if we continue, you can see we have a build which just runs the yarn build and returns a directory for the dist, which is the index. I can't remember the file names, but it's just all the actual pre-built items that would go to Lambda. And we also have another one that runs tests, that just runs our test and returns standard out, which is a string, right? So you see there's a lot of really core types to TypeScript, to the programming language of your choice. And there's also the Dagger types, like a file and container, that we get here. We can kind of chain those. So you can see here, there's a zip function, which is, if you ever deploy anything to Lambda, you're going to have this function.zip you're going to upload. You can do an ECR, because Lambda does support containers, but that's beyond, not really beyond this. So you see that we're choosing this base and this build, and we're doing this. And this is not ideal because, we have a build function up here that we could have called, which would return a directory. And then we create and return a file, which just gives us that function.zip. And then here we have the deploy function. And this is really kind of where all the work happens. And because Dagger is code, and kind of, if in this case, you can kind of look at it as like AWS CDK is kind of, responsible for creating resources and creating stacks, I believe is what they call them. And you can put those into pieces and reuse them. But you can see here, I'm passing in an access key, a secret key, the token in my region, and I'm waiting for the test to pass. And then I'm making my config. And then because this is TypeScript, I've included the TypeScript or the JavaScript SDK from AWS, and I can do things that are not quote unquote container related, but those are things I need for my workflow and for my software. So I'll create a role if it exists, or if it does not exist. I'll get the function URL, check if it exists, and then make that. But let's look at how we actually use that, because one of the things you notice is that there's this func here. That means that this is a Dagger function. And then there's some some private stuff down here. I also have the destroy, which takes the same stuff and removes all the resources that I created. And I have private methods down here that are not related to Dagger. So my API for my Dagger user is, if I say Dagger functions, you'll see that it's going to do everything it needs to do to run the container. It's going to look at my my module. It's going to get everything set up, and then it's going to show me, hey, these are the functions that you have. You have the base, and the descriptions again come from those code comments and the types. So if I said Dagger call deploy help, you'll see that I've taken these arguments, which is a secret. Again, that works from 1Password, HashiCorp Vault, environment variables, etc. Again, the key thing with Dagger is it doesn't require you, it doesn't pass everything over. You have to require what you need for that function to run. So it only has the minimal. But let's go ahead and say, I need to use this real quick shortcut. Use AWS profile. So I can set some environment variables and say deploy. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to get rid of this sidebar, is I'm going to say Dagger call deploy, which we just saw, and I'm going to pass those arguments for the access key, which is my environment variable here, my secret key, which is my secret environment variable, and my session token. And then I'm just going to hit enter, and we'll let this run. And this again is going to get everything that I need. It's going to start building everything. I can see everything that's happening here. I can see, oh, we have a cache volume for our dependencies for node 20. It's running yarn install. It's okay, could not be parsed, which of course this would happen, right? So the end was supposed to be a working. Let's pull this up. Was supposed to be a working ARN, but of course it did not work. So, but you can see here that that's why you don't refactor things the last minute. But it will create the resources, and then it will also make the software and ship it, and then upload it to Lambda and give us a function URL. So with that, I think I'll take some time for questions.
Hey, Jason, thanks. You know, it happens to all of us, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. I've been there before. I'm like I literally just tested this right before I got on. So yeah, don't worry about it. But that's really cool. So let me ask you, like I do use CDK. Would I use this instead of CDK or use it in conjunction with CDK? How do you see that working?
It really depends on your use case. You know, for simple things like I've previous to Dagger, I built a cloud platform, heavy on Terraform. You know, we use Terraform everywhere because we wanted this kind of reproducible state. But if it's a complex, you know, thing where you need VPCs and you need this, like you could use CDK. I've actually never really used CDK inside of Dagger, but as long as you have those credentials, it should work. You know, the same way.
Okay.
And I think with the London hack night earlier this year, and someone had man, I'm forgetting the name of the game, run a video game inside of Dagger, StarCraft, or I can't think of the name, but yeah. So like
Nice.
what you can do is just kind of wild. If you want to, it's programming language, so whatever you can yarn add or, you know, npm install, then you can get it running.
Art says he thinks it was Doom. Was it Doom? He's like, it's always Doom.
But Doom would have been cool. I don't think I've seen Doom, but it was like the Star Quest or StarCraft, a really old game that I didn't know how these college kids had even really heard of. So
Oh yeah, those retro games are back in. So okay, but I guess so you can use Terraform and you can use CDK, but like I guess ultimately this is kind of a replacement for doing those things if in the long term,
Uh, not
or
necessarily.
not really.
It
Okay.
it could be. I mean, it really, again, it's, I hate that answer, but it really does depend. It depends on your use case. And if you're like,
Right.
you could have used serverless framework to build the stuff, but you still need to run, like you probably want to run your tests, and you probably want to run a linter, and you want to, make sure everything's kind of good to go. And then let's talk about, you want to have a PR that makes a preview environment. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like you could write that as a Dagger module. We have GitHub Action integration, and we have a lot of GitHub PR stuff. So we have like a lot of our internal workflows on Dagger. You can see that we will make pull request environments and comment on that, and you'll see everything is just kind of live and right there. So yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. That's really cool. So because this is running like in a container, I just deploy some of this stuff locally, or because you said you were deploying to actual AWS and then going to get a function URL back, right? So this like
Yeah.
is deploying to real AWS, not to
Yes.
containerized AWS. Okay, so like, but for some of the stuff, like, can I just deploy, say, to Docker desktop, or like to my Docker local Docker as well? Or I mean,
Yeah, if
yeah,
you wanted to
yeah,
build your image,
yeah.
container image locally and run all your tests, I remember there's a new syntax that I'm not remembering off the top of my head that we just introduced, where it would make it a lot easier to take that image that you built inside of Dagger. A Dagger, you return a
Hmm.
container, and you can push that to your host. So that could be Docker desktop, it could be a Rancher. Um, in this case, I'm just zipping some files up in a container and returning those, and then uploading that directly to Lambda's API, right? So,
Yeah.
but all that is running on Docker desktop on my local machine, and we could move that same stuff up to GitHub Actions, and it would still work there as well.
Okay. Very cool. And so my last question is really like, just I want to, because I think it's really cool what you got in the Daggerverse. Can you tell us more about like what do you what are some of the more exciting modules that you, besides LocalStack, of course, that are in the Daggerverse?
um, I would say one, the K3s one is weird, because you wouldn't really expect to be able to run K3s as part of a Dagger module. So that one's interesting. But also, if you look at Dagger, we have a modules directory that has a bunch of our internal stuff that we build. That we have Wolfie in there too, so we actually can really pick at what specific languages we want. Built a really tight container image of just the stuff that we actually really need. So I'm trying to think of, just pull up another one. There's our featured modules there too. We recently just shipped Artifactory. That's also something else to work with JFrog. Um, let's see. There's the Helm one. Um, yeah, it's kind of incredible. There's so much in the Daggerverse that
Yeah.
just to look at. And we are
Yeah,
making
it
improvements
is
on like
pretty.
search and stuff
It,
like that. So it's better.
yeah, I mean, I you just keep scrolling. I mean, there's like hundreds of modules in there. It's pretty impressive. All right. Well, I really appreciate the presentation, Jason. Sorry the demo gods kind of cursed you today, but
No
it
worries.
happens.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right.
All right,
Thanks, Jason.
thanks. All right.
All right. So we are gonna move on to our very next presentation. And hopefully, Harsh was giving you were already like giving your like, what do you call, alms to the demo gods earlier or whatever. Hopefully it goes better. Um from that standpoint for you. But like, go ahead and tell us a little bit more about. We talked a little bit about the Daggerverse and Dagger modules with Jason. You're going to talk about, we have a LocalStack module, so and show us how to use that to integrate into your workflows. So go ahead.
Sounds good. Thanks, Brian, for giving me the stage, and thanks, Jason, for an awesome introduction to Dagger. I guess by this time I have looked at over a dozen videos, like kind of explaining Dagger and kind of going into the specifics and the internals, but it's always something new that you always learn every now and then. So appreciate it. And I would love to introduce all of you to the LocalStack Dagger module and all the things that we have done to kind of bring the Dagger experience to the LocalStack users. So in this session, it would be fairly quick. I'll just give a basic background on LocalStack. I'm pretty sure 95% of our audience already knows what LocalStack is, and kind of show like how the whole Dagger integration fits into this whole pipeline. And I will be walking through a real world example. So I would be live coding, and I just hope that the demo gods are with me again. So with that said, just moving on to the next slide. So yes, let's first talk a bit about what exactly LocalStack is and how does the whole thing fit in over here. So for the people like who are not familiar with LocalStack and the whole local cloud development concept, LocalStack is pretty much like an end-to-end local cloud development platform. So we have been around for about 9 years now. We just happened to reach about 60,000 GitHub stars, which like my marketing lead says that puts us in an elite category of the projects available in open source and on GitHub. But our goal pretty much remains the same, that we basically want people to build, test, and debug their cloud applications faster, and just to be more efficient while building those cloud apps, because we can technically bring the cloud right to your local machine. So far, we have been pretty much focusing on the inner dev loop, as you can see on this slide, which is pretty much like coding stuff, building it, testing it, debugging this. And the way that we do that is by providing emulators for your particular use case. So we can technically emulate services like S3, services like Lambda, DynamoDB, and more of that. And now we're also exploring on how we can expand to the outer dev loop. So we can kind of build those integrations, we can kind of build those workflows that just go beyond a regular dev cycle, and that can also help you like just test more efficiently and kind of share and integrate, promote, and also share stuff like preview environments to your colleagues or your team members. So going a deep further into this, I really wanted to show this slide about how LocalStack is an easy on-ramp into AWS, because this is an opportunity for me to kind of just share my thoughts about how this whole Dagger integration kind of plays out. So in this case, you can technically see that LocalStack isn't like a replacement for a regular staging environment or something of that sort. We basically provide some additional layers of testing. So if you're developing an application right now, instead of deploying this on an AWS sandbox, you can instead do that on LocalStack. And you can basically make sure that everything works out before you actually try to push out on the production. So one of the reasons LocalStack has gained like traction is because we have centrally built around the Docker ecosystem. Now, that decision perhaps would have been the best one that we have taken so far, because you don't need to have a lot of different setups or environments and all that stuff. You can just pull our Docker Hub image. You can spin out an entirely local AWS environment, which is very, very ideal for just iterating quickly or setting up LocalStack in CI environments. Now, the reason why Dagger makes this a bit interesting is because, as Jason already mentioned, it takes a Docker first foundation, and then you kind of wrap it around those composable pipelines. So you can choose any particular general purpose programming language that you love and you desire. So stuff like Python, Go, JavaScript, TypeScript, whatever that is. And instead of like managing those containers in a Docker file or in a Docker Compose or whatever that is, you can actually start abstracting all of that into programmable workflows. So when I actually see people using LocalStack today, the regular workflow is that they spin up LocalStack, they set up their integration. So be it my Terraform or CDK or SAM or whatever they're using, they run their infrastructure tests, tear everything down. But all of this process is very, very manual. And the most problematic part is this isn't exactly reproducible. For example, I have got 2 machines right now, and for some reason, since I don't have the correct bin dependencies, the project that's working on this machine might not work on the other. So it's not very reproducible. But again, LocalStack does a lot of like hand holding and like heavy lifting over here. But again, like there are a lot of other things that you also like need to manage. But with Dagger, you can basically abstract all of that. You can create a declarative pipeline, and you can basically create like a reproducible layer of validation before you actually go to AWS. So I guess that's one of the merits that we were kind of looking into when we set out creating a Dagger module. And this local testing layer just slots right into the Dagger pipelines. So you don't have to worry about what am I going to do if I try to push this on the CI. You can take the same pipeline, you can run it locally. You can also run it on your GitHub Actions or Circle CI, whatever that is. And it would exactly behave like your dev setup. Because as I said before, Dagger's foundation has been in the container ecosystem. So you should not be expecting any surprises or any configuration drift, any of those fun little things that just makes our lives a bit hellish. So going over to the next, yes, so let's talk a bit about the LocalStack Dagger module and what this initial preview release has all been about. So as I said before, like people weren't just like running LocalStack on their laptops, but also CI/CD pipelines. Reproducibility was a real pain point, so we needed a clear way where we can kind of automate this whole workflow end to end. And I guess this is where the Dagger module simply came in. You can like use our Dagger module instead of like writing a bunch of shell scripts or Docker commands to get LocalStack up and running on your local machine, of course, and also in your CI. And this module kind of gives you a very composable interface. So with this Dagger module, the one that we have released just right now, like we kind of put out the release about a couple of months back, and this is now available on Daggerverse. So with this module right now, you can technically start both LocalStack or Pro LocalStack Community or Pro images as a service. I guess that's the best thing, and that's where people would be using this module the most. We also have a couple of proprietary features. So if you're using features like CloudPods, for example, you can technically manage your service state. So let us say that you just did a Terraform or CDK deployment within a Dagger pipeline, but you want to save or preserve the state so that the next pipeline can technically use that. So you can use CloudPods to exactly persist all that state and kind of pass it through the next upcoming pipeline. So just share that with all your colleagues so that they don't have to do a manual infrastructure setup every now and then. We also have this new feature called as Ephemeral Instance. And as Jason was already talking about how ephemeral instances how preview deployments can be like this one niche feature where Dagger can really be used. We already provide that. I would perhaps say that the preview deployments or these ephemeral instances have been massively popular in the front-end ecosystem. Like companies like Vercel or Netlify, they have been massively building blocks on kind of giving the capability to do preview deployments. I would say that LocalStack is perhaps the only one that not only does it for the front end or the back end, but also for your infrastructure. So if you have got a CDK stack, if you have got a Terraform script, you can deploy that on an ephemeral instance and you can get to see how this whole thing works out. And LocalStack can spin up a temporary deployment, put your entire application over there, and you can basically get to see a preview URL that you can share with all your colleagues or team members. And all of this directly within your Dagger function. So the idea behind this was keep the whole API service thin and flexible. So you don't have to manually do a lot of things like auth token handling, Docker socket mounting, exposing all the ports. And you can pretty much wrap your whole pipeline into reusable and declarative blocks so that you don't have to kind of hard code it every now and then in different programming languages. LocalStack Dagger module is implemented in Python, but you can technically use it in Node.js, in Go, in .NET, whatever SDKs Dagger pretty much supports right now. So I would say like this is a pretty great foundation that we have built out to help our users like build repeatable and testable infrastructure workflows that you can pretty much maintain across both local development and CI pipelines. So just to give a basic idea about the installation and the usage, as you can see, like the Dagger's semantics have been very much influenced by how Go as a language has worked out. Like the commands look very, very similar. That's the first thing that I noticed when I was starting up with Dagger. But it's very simple. Like all you need is a single command. You can just say like Dagger install and the link to our specific repository. And what this would do is like this would install the LocalStack Dagger module from GitHub, and Dagger pretty much runs a container on your local machine. So everything is kind of encapsulated inside that. Once that is done, the next command to spin up LocalStack is literally Dagger called startup. That's exactly all you need. You don't need to worry about installing a separate LocalStack CLI. You don't need to worry about setting up some specific config variables or anything. You just set up the first set of things. And after that, whenever you do a Dagger called startup, LocalStack will be up and ready. It will run on localhost 4566. So whatever AWS SDKs, CLI, infrastructure as code frameworks you're using right now, you can pretty much like point them to the running LocalStack service that's within the Dagger pipeline, and you can start interacting with the whole thing over here. Again, this is like just a very basic example. If you actually go on to our README, for this repository, I'll drop the link onto the YouTube live chat, so you should be able to check it out from there. But if you actually go to our repository and check out our README, we have a lot of different commands that kind of explains how you can get started with this module. So if you're using the community image right now, that's the command that I was mentioning just before that slide. Then you have got features, then you have got like additional commands where you can spin up LocalStack Pro. This would basically require you to set up an auth token so that the LocalStack Pro can authenticate against our backend. You can also customize LocalStack. So if you have a specific config variable like services or something like that, you can pretty much pass it like to the Dagger pipeline, which it can then use to instantiate LocalStack within the whole workflow. You can mount your Docker socket. And if you're interested into our proprietary features, like there are very extensive commands right over here that would exactly tell you how this would go about. If you're also like looking to actually see some cool end-to-end examples, we have got this examples directory, and we have got documented examples in Go, Python, Shell, and TypeScript. So all of these examples will kind of just walk you through all of the things that is possible with our pipeline in the current state. So if I jump back to our slide, maybe what I can show is one quick demo before we actually get started with this, like before we actually get started with our bigger demo, which would require some sort of a live coding. So in this case, all that I would be showing you is how you can start LocalStack and how you can use your AWS CLI to interact with the running LocalStack service. So as I mentioned before, all that you need to have is set up Dagger, set up the link to the repository, and just mention call start up. And what this would do behind the scenes is that it would pull the LocalStack Docker image from Docker Hub, and it is going to start up the LocalStack service, and this would expose port 4566, after which you can start interacting with the LocalStack service. So it's a pretty simple and easy to use workflow. The LocalStack CLI equivalent was pip install LocalStack start, and then you have got the whole setup running. But in this case, if anyone has got Dagger installed, all that you need to do is either install it or point the link to the module, and you can pretty much use LocalStack without requiring any further customizations. So this is going to take, I guess, a few seconds here and there. But once this is done, this would expose the port on 4566, and you are basically good to go in using that module. So let's give it a few more seconds. I just hope we haven't done any pushes right now, because it kind of tries to pull the latest image, which would obviously take some time. Okay, so yes, we definitely pushed out another image about half an hour back. So this would definitely take some time. So maybe we can try to jump over to the next slides, and I can just follow up later and just show you the whole thing up and running. So yes, let's not try to spend any more time on that. So the demo that I would be showcasing over here is going to be very simple. We are going to Daggerize a Terraform test pipeline. So I did a talk on Terraform tests about a couple of months back. And Terraform test is basically a way for you to write native infrastructure tests for your Terraform projects. So in this case, you can basically use the HashiCorp configuration language, HCL, and you can get started with that. So you can like write your unit tests, you can write your integration tests pretty much within your Terraform project without requiring to use any other frameworks or tools out there. So what we will do in this case is we will take up like an existing Terraform test project from the HashiCorp's GitHub repository. We will Daggerize that project. And by Daggerize, what I mean is that we will set up a Dagger pipeline. we will use the LocalStack module, and we will try to run those same tests that you would have run on AWS, but we will try to run them straight up on LocalStack. So the reason that I'm doing this is to just show about how you can just like write one composable workflow, and you can kind of replicate it anywhere else. You don't require it to, you don't require, you're like not required to set it up on different platforms or different languages. It's like one workflow to rule them all. So if I just jump back to my code spaces again, this is now up and running, which is pretty good. So my local stack is up and running, and as you can see over here, these are the local stack container logs. You can obviously increase the verbosity of those logs over here to get to see what's happening behind the scenes. But what I can show you right now is if I actually go to my other terminal tab, I can use a standard integration like AWS Local, for example, and I can do some stuff with this. So for example, if I want to create a bucket, I can say AWS Local S3, make me a bucket, and that's the name of the bucket. And what AWS Local will do is that it will communicate with localhost 4566, which is the local stack edge port. And as you can see on the Dagger logs, we have got the S3 service, we have got the create bucket API, and that's 200 status code, which means that our bucket creation was successful. If I actually query my bucket right now, you can get to see the same thing like running behind the scenes. Again, like this is just a basic example, more akin to a hello world kind of a setup. But you can take this example and you can try to just use Dagger to like run local stack anywhere, be it on your local machine or be it on your CI. And Dagger pretty much like wraps the entire local stack functions and the capabilities and allows you, like gives you a very nice and clean API to kind of manage the whole thing over there. But again, like that's not the part that I'm most excited by. The part that I'm excited about is the way that you can write your pipelines in different programming languages. And this is what I'm going to show you. So as I was talking about, this is a project that I would be showing you today. This is HashiCorp's Learn Terraform test. Yes. Can I just get a confirmation from any of the hosts if I'm still audible? StreamYard has been showing me some warnings. Okay, I guess I got the confirmation. Cool. So yes, this is the HashiCorp's Learn Terraform test repository. You can go and check out on the docs that they have provided about how to write the Terraform tests. But again, we are just going to use this as a cookbook, as an example over here to like just take the basic template and try to diagramize this whole setup over here. So in this particular case, I have already set this repository up in a GitHub code space. And if I just happen to minimize a bit, you can already see like this is our main.tf file. And what it is doing is like it's setting up an S3 website. And it is like creating an index.html and error.html. And it has got this whole Terraform code that's creating the bucket, setting up the ACL, setting up the necessary policies and all that stuff, and making sure that we have a well-architected S3 website deployed on AWS. But again, since we just want to run some tests, these are composed in this test directory, and there is the website.tftest.html file. And what this is doing is like it will run a basic assertion test just to make sure that the bucket will be accurately created. And then it is going to run some further tests to make sure that the index.html hash matches and the rest of the things. That would ensure that our website has been currently deployed. Now, given the fact that LocalStack already provides an S3 emulator within our central offering, we can just deploy this on LocalStack and we can run those same tests over there instead of doing all of that on AWS instead. So the first step that I would be taking in this example is to actually set up a pipeline, set up a workflow that I can exactly start writing my code in. Dagger has provided an excellent build a CI workflow guide over here. So I would definitely implore all of you interested in this particular topic to go and check this out. And I would be basically heavily using that as well. So in this case, I want to initialize a Dagger module first. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this command, go back over here, and just specify the name of my project. So in this case, the name of my project is going to be Terraform test. And what I can do over here is that maybe I can just skip this. It's like its job is over. And when I say Dagger init and specify the SDK to be Python, what it is going to do is like it will set up my project over here and it will create a bunch of files in this case. So we will get dagger.json, and this basically specifies the name of my project, the engine version that I'm using, the SDK that I'm using, and all of that information. And then there is the .dagger subdirectory within the project's root. And over here, you will see the source folder, and you will see a main.py file. And Dagger will basically instantiate a bunch of default Dagger functions for you. So in Dagger's terminology, like these functions basically are called as Dagger functions, because once you execute them, Dagger will package them within containers. And that would pretty much make them reproducible. You can share it with anyone, and you don't need to have like a bunch of additional dependencies set up on your side. So if I actually do this right in this case, for example, like I say Dagger functions, what Dagger would do is like it will connect to the Dagger engine, and it will just list me all of the functions that's available over here. So to Daggerize this project, the central pattern that we would be using is first start our LocalStack Dagger module, make sure that we have an endpoint exposed that we can try to connect against. And second, we will try to like set up the Terraform Docker image. And over there, we will try to mount this whole project files and all the directories what we have over here. And we will try to deploy it against, sorry, not deploy. We will try to instantiate all the modules and all the dependencies. And then we will try to run the tests against LocalStack within the Terraform container. I know like it sounds a bit complex in theory, but if you actually get to see the example, this would be more seamless. So let's actually go about doing this whole thing. So the first thing that we would be doing in this case, and let me just clear out the terminal, is we can just nuke this whole default files over here, sorry, default content over here. And then we can start with the absolute basics. So first, we can set up a function, and this function would be called as LocalStack Terraform test. So in this function, we would set the self, and we would try to set up a project directory. Now, this is very important because we technically want to mount our project directory inside the Dagger pipeline. This is very similar to how we do project mounting within Docker containers and all that stuff. So it would be very similar over here. So we would specify the project dir, and we would pass in this dagger.directory API, which is going to take care of this whole thing for us. So in this case, the project directory would be basically passed in as an argument, and you can mention like the root directory to be the one that Dagger should be mounting. Once this is done, we can go over to the next step. And this is where we can try to first like run our LocalStack Dagger module. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to specify service, and I'm going to say like dag.localstack. And LocalStack is basically our Dagger module that we are trying to set up over here. And we would mention this as start. The next step is gonna be like await this and then start our LocalStack service in this case. And finally, we can just use endpoint. We can await the endpoint, get the endpoint over here. Copilot has been behaving a bit wonky. But what I can do finally is I can print the endpoint just to see if this whole pipeline setup is actually working in the way that I expect it to be. So once this is set up, the first thing that I can do is like just call the name of all the functions again, because we removed a bunch of default functions that we had already set up. It's going to take some time, but it's going to be something like localstack-terraform-test. And once that is done, yes, it's done over here. I can say Dagger call localstack-terraform-test. I can specify the project dir over here by passing in the flag. And I can just mention the root directory right in this case. So what it is going to do is that it will try to start the LocalStack pipeline. It will create the endpoint, and it will just print it out. Okay, so there's an error. Client object has no attribute LocalStack. Pretty self-explanatory. But what is actually happening over here is that I did not install LocalStack Dagger module, which was a classic mistake. So I'm just going to install it right in this case, just to make sure that this runs successfully. So Dagger install and the name to the link to the repository. And once this is done, I can actually go to dagger.json, and you can now see that with the dependencies, we have got the LocalStack Dagger module again. Cool. So let's try to run the same command again, just to ensure that this is now working out. It will take a few more seconds, but hopefully not as much as it took the last time. Otherwise, we just proceed with the rest of the parts. But now what it is trying to do is it's trying to execute the thing. It's mounting the project directory. That's a LocalStack service that's running right now. The stat command has been executed. And now it would run the container, expose the port, And this is done. This is successful. The best part about Dagger as a platform is the lovely trace experience over here. So if I actually show you that in this case, you can directly go to the trace experience that's available on Dagger Cloud, and you can get to see like how your application has behaved the whole time. So in this case, like I just wanted to print my endpoint, the endpoint to my LocalStack container, which you can basically get to see over here. And that's the endpoint that we would be using to also deploy our Terraform project back on LocalStack. So since we're short on time, let's try to make a bit haste and let's try to just execute the rest of the things. So now I'm going to create another variable called as tools. And this is where the fun thing happens. Copilot is already suggesting me a lot of different things that I can set up. So maybe I can just accept that and remove some of the things that I just don't need right now. But just to explain what's happening over here is that I'm now creating another container. And this container is basically like HashiCorp's Terraform image over here. So this would basically start the Terraform image as a container. And we would mount our project directory inside the source directory within the container. And we can also mention some of the further things. So for example, we also want it to be bound to the LocalStack service that we just started. So in this case, it's going to be mentioned as LocalStack, and the service would be the same one that we just started over here. We can go a bit further, and we can try to just install a tool in this case. And this tool is going to be the bash itself, because I believe that this isn't part of the image itself. So I can just say no cache. And yes, let's install bash over here. Okay, we are done. And finally, we would like to pass in an environment variable. And this environment variable is basically something that Terraform would pick up, and it would exactly know where to point the LocalStack endpoint to. So this is already something that we have configured in the provider.tf file. That's a variable that we have set up. And we're passing in this variable to the S3 endpoint. So in this case, it would exactly know that this is where LocalStack is running. So just point all of the API requests to this particular URL. Just going back over here, I guess I missed something. And yes, that was to add an F string. So I can just mention it over here, and I believe we are done. Once this is done, the first step that I'm going to take is going to be simple. I can just say tools with exec. And what I would like to execute over here is a very simple, like Terraform init command, because that's what we do when we are setting up Terraform for the first time. So I can just say Terraform init. And maybe the next step is gonna be, let's do it again with exec. And instead of doing Terraform apply, because we don't want to apply, we just want to run our integration tests, I can just do Terraform test. And I believe this should be it. So as a final step, we can just, okay, maybe I missed something. Yes, I guess so. Cool. So as a final step, what I can do is I can just await the result to that. Copilot has been a pretty good colleague in this whole thing. And finally, I can just return this result or just return success, whatever that is. I guess I believe like this is all that it would take for me to like run this whole pipeline end to end. So let's go about this. Let's try to execute it again and see if we run into any further issues over here, which I guess should not be the case. But again, this would be executing the very same steps, but some of the new steps that we have added is to mount the current directory into the source directory within the Terraform container, install bash, specify the LocalStack endpoint, because that's what Terraform would be picking up to deploy the whole configuration code over there. And finally, initialize the Terraform project and run our tests against that. So LocalStack is running. It's now picking up the Terraform container, mounting all the stuff that we needed to do. And now I believe it should be running the steps that actually we care about a lot. So initializing the Terraform project and finally running the tests over here. But I guess like once this is actually executed, like you can basically get to see that your assertion tests and your final integration tests have been executed successfully against a LocalStack container. If you actually open the traces, you can see the LocalStack logs, and you would see like LocalStack has been firing up a bunch of S3 API requests, which kind of shows us that this whole thing is running pretty successfully right now. But again, like this is a very basic template that just worked out. You can, of course, like take this example, try to extend it a bit further, add a few more resources. or try to use an entirely different like IAC or something out there. It's like Dagger pretty much like gives you the ability to do a lot of things, like not just CI stuff, but also like AI functionalities, LLMs, and all of that. So it basically is the central hub for you to create your composable pipelines. So as you can see, both our tests are pretty successful right now. That's exactly what we intended it to do. Terraforming the classic way is trying to destroy those resources. That will take some time. But again, like now that this is successful, Dagger will pretty much like exit out successfully. You can get to open the traces again, and you would see the whole thing that has played out over there. So yes, this is successful. 2 of our tests have passed. 0 of them have failed. And again, if you're interested, you can go and check out the traces to see how this whole thing has played out in the finale. Awesome. Given that we have gone through this, maybe now is a good time to just end it on some good closing notes. LocalStack Dagger module, again, it's a very initial release. It supports some of the key features like starting LocalStack up, using cloud pods, spinning up ephemeral instances. But again, you can basically chain out different modules together. So for example, you can use LocalStack Dagger module with the Terraform module or K3s module, and you can try to like just make sure that you have a composable pipeline that you can use anywhere. The best thing about LocalStack plus Dagger is you don't have to like run your tests on AWS. You can pretty much do that using Dagger. So Jason's like demo fail would not have happened if he was using LocalStack, because you could have easily debugged it out and just ensure that it was working locally before actually pushing it out to AWS. So giving that extra validation or a testing layer would save you from a lot of trouble, especially when that trouble concerns some money. And finally, LocalStack basically acts as a drop-in replacement. So you don't have to worry about too many things. I pretty much took the same project, just added an additional file and maybe an additional environment variable, and it was able to work out pretty brilliantly. And the one thing that I love about Dagger is its structured logs and the traces. So do definitely use that, because this would give you additional insights into how your whole test pipeline is behaving and what you can do to further optimize that. I guess with that said, I am open to questions, but if you'd like to connect with me, like these are my social handles. You can definitely scan the QR code, join our Slack, and share whatever feedback that you have got with our team. So
awesome, Harsh.
Thank you.
That was great. So let me just kind of clarify for folks that if you use this LocalStack module, you could actually run your tests, but also like still do the deploy to AWS all in Dagger. So like you could take Jason's example, which had the deploy, right? But you could have run a test first that tested everything, but did that in LocalStack. So all of that would happen locally, and then if that's successful, then we could run the deploy. Correct?
Yep.
Yeah, and all of that we can configure in Dagger. So you could do like
Exactly.
test, deploy, and everything. Yeah,
Yes.
that's sweet. So like, as you mentioned, you could prevent having to like do that in wait for those resources in AWS. I mean, I think Jason's example was just like an S3 bucket or Lambda as well, which is relatively fast to deploy. But if you're deploying much bigger infrastructure, that could take some time, cost some money. Very cool. So what would you say is like your favorite thing, like in terms of what does this enable? Like, how does this help developers? Like, if they use this in conjunction with Dagger, what is the biggest benefit?
I would say the biggest benefit right now is that you can take the same setup and replicate that both locally and on CI. I guess some of the things that we can agree with is that LocalStack, like if you're trying to use it with multiple tools out there, it is very notorious to create reproducible setups. So stuff that might work on my machine might not work on yours. And the same goes for like different things out there. So I guess the Dagger's best thing, and I have harped about that too many times within the session. So I'm just going to mention it one more time. It's reproducibility. You can basically like take the building blocks. You can use models out there. You can create like a very simple end-to-end workflow, and you can pretty much reproduce that anywhere. You want to run this on your laptop, good to go. You want to run this on your CI pipeline, good to go. And this is something that I believe a lot of people actually care about. Like if I'm running some tests, if I'm running some deployments, I don't want like any like differences in behavior or any drift happening if I'm trying to push it from my local machine to CI, from my CI to my deployment. I guess LocalStack definitely, because of the AWS parity, eases a lot of that issues out there. But again, if you're depending on a lot of different things out there, like a lot of different tool chains or libraries or frameworks, like even like good setups can break. Dagger will definitely alleviate a lot of pain if you're trying to use that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I haven't gotten the chance to use it, but like when you were showing the structured logs, very sweet. That's
Yes.
super helpful, much easier to parse and things like that. So that could be incredibly helpful. Okay. So I know we are running a little overtime, so I'm gonna I don't see any other questions. So thank you, Harsh. That was great. And with that, I am also going to kind of do our goodbyes. I really appreciate everybody who attended today and stuck around for both sessions. We will be back again at the end of next month. Look for details if you follow us on meetup.com or follow our YouTube channel or LinkedIn. You'll get those details soon, as soon as we post them. But I look forward to seeing you next month. Thanks again for joining. Bye.